Welcome to EPI STEM podcast. This EPI STEM podcast is brought to you from the National Centre of STEM Education at the School of Education in the University of Limerick. I'm your host, Geraldine Simmie, and I'm the Professor of STEM Education here at the Centre and the Director of EPI STEM. And my co-host,
Michelle Starr, and I am the Research Liaison Officer in EPI STEM.
Welcome back, everyone. And my co-host, Michelle, is missing today, but we're joined by Associate Professor Niamh O'Meara, who's here welcoming. And we're welcoming a very, very special guest here today who's here in person, Professor Merrilyn Goos from Australia, who's a former director of EPI STEM and who's an adjunct professor now, advisory with us here in EPI STEM in the National Centre for STEM Education. You're most welcome, Merrilyn.
Thank you, Geraldine. It's great to be here.
And you've just literally stepped down off your flight, have you?
Not quite literally. I've been here about 24 hours now. So, it's lovely to be back.
And what part of Australia are you from?
I'm from Brisbane, which is the capital of the state of Queensland, on the east coast of Australia, about halfway up the coast, if people can visualise that.
Yeah. Well, we know you more as a world-renowned mathematics educator and researcher, and you're president of the International Commission for Mathematics Instruction. So you have, left us a huge legacy with the Professional Diploma in Mathematics for Teaching, and you've given us wonderful boost, I suppose, with the HEA resources in mathematics and science education as well, that has all helped us found the Academy, our Academy for STEM teachers. So do you want to kick off and talk about some aspect of maths education and what fires you up in that area?
Well, I do still get fired up about maths education, even though I am allegedly retired and have been for a couple of years. The good thing is I get to do the things that interest me now. I suppose the things that I'm most interested in are supporting teachers and their learning and their practice. And I enjoy that, not because I think teachers need fixing, but because I learn so much from that experience. So I have worked with some wonderful teachers, maths teachers, throughout my life. In fact, one of the projects I'm doing at the moment, I'm seeing lessons that would be amongst the best that I've ever seen. So this is a project which is investigating the idea of critical mathematical thinking. So critical mathematical thinking, or critical thinking, tends to be found in most school curricula around the world now. We know that critical thinking is very important because our world is complex. The problems that we need to deal with in our lives don't have easy solutions, nor do they have solutions that just sit within one discipline. So we need to move between disciplines. So the idea of this project is presenting secondary school students with authentic real-life scenarios and asking them, what would you do about this?
Yes.
So we might be critiquing some policies about looking after homeless people, for example. Mm-hmm. Or one of the nice tasks that we've been using in classrooms is looking at the aftermath of some terrible floods that we had in Brisbane a couple of years ago that, destroyed or damaged many houses, which are in flood-prone situations.
Yes.
So one thing that the local government did was begin a flood buyback scheme by offering homeowners some money to leave their home and go and buy a house somewhere else.
Yes.
But those,
it's inspiring a critical consciousness among the young people.
Absolutely.
And bringing their maths to bear in on it, all of their knowledge, and bringing all that into bear and having that good ethics. I suppose it's really a big ethical question as well.
Yes, very much so.
So how to be a person, an educated person in the world with others.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You put that so well.
Niamh.
Yeah, and just that reminds me as well. So you've talked about how you worked with maths teachers and obviously this current project, but you've worked with teachers of all subjects when you looked at numeracy across the curriculum, and I think that feeds into that the task that you're speaking about now. So do you want to talk a tiny bit about that project and just your interest in numeracy across the curriculum? Because numeracy now obviously has to be integrated into all our teacher education programmes, so I suppose we're always looking for ideas of how best to do that as well, which you're an expert on.
Yes, well, that's an interesting one, Niamh. I guess I came to numeracy kind of by accident, and for a long time didn't really treat it as one of my main research interests, but it's been by far the most impactful work that I've done. So the idea, I think the idea is not that we're trying to force numeracy into every subject in the school curriculum, because it's already there.
Yes.
And it's about helping teachers recognise where those opportunities lie. So neither is it about trying to turn teachers of other subjects into maths teachers, even though we have a shortage of maths teachers, but that's not the point. So yes, I've worked with, certainly primary school teachers who teach everything, but secondary school teachers of practically every subject in the school curriculum to help them see where the numeracy is in their subject. So the way we started doing that was to do a numeracy audit of the school curriculum and all the different subjects there, using the numeracy model that I developed. And then when you present that to teachers, the looks on their faces are just looks of wonder where they realise, yes, now I see.
Yes.
And that's when they really start coming up with interesting, very creative ideas. So they're not teaching maths, they're teaching their subject, but using numeracy to teach it in a better way.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. And I mean, when you look at, I suppose, all of the teacher knowledge, the upskilling in teacher knowledge that you've not only written about and researched, but that you've been part and parcel of developing here with us in the University of Limerick with the PDMT, all of that work, the importance of the mathematics teacher having the mathematics knowledge. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a key piece. Then there's lots of other pieces. Teaching is relational, it's complex, it's all of that. But if the important piece is that they actually have the mathematics knowledge. But you've done a lot of research on border crossing with mathematicians, and we've developed with John O'Donoghue and with yourself a great relationship with the math and stats department here in UL. Do you want to talk about that border crossing and the importance of it?
I'm really glad you raised that, Geraldine, because this is something that I realise now that has been important to me for most of my career. And I guess for most of that time, it's kind of felt like risky, like it's a risky space to be in. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of my maths education colleagues are looking at me and saying, why do you want to work with those people? And the reason why I do want to work with those people is because all of us contribute to the education and development of teachers of mathematics. So I think once you realise that mathematicians do have an interest and a genuine stake in this, in
yes.
preparing teachers,
yes.
then some of the barriers start to fall away. So the idea of, boundary crossing has a nice theoretical base, but when you actually live it yourself, you really come to understand it a whole lot better. And it's not particularly easy work,
no.
but I have learned a great deal by working with mathematicians, and it's been very enjoyable.
I did a lot of that work with the European projects I was in, a lot of border crossing, Engestrom's work on activity theory and all of that. And the theoretical frameworks are there, but as you say, the living practice of it is another story. It is a very complex area, but well worth it because, it is the important piece of interplaying the knowledge with the real lives of people and having that mathematics knowledge feed in there. That's the piece, isn't it? That's the end game, really. Is that interplay happens?
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
And I think as well, and Geraldine has referenced it already. When you were here and as the director of EPI STEM, obviously the PDMT, you made huge contributions to it. And I suppose you're unique in that you have kind of an international overview of the PDMT, but you also know what it's like running it on the ground. And it obviously is such an important programme for us here in Ireland. What lessons did you take from the PDMT that you kind of brought away with you back to Australia? Or looking now from the Australian perspective, is there anything you could advise regarding the future of the PDMT or the upskilling of out-of-field teachers in general in the area of mathematics?
Well, it's interesting. I think when I went back to Australia, I was asked for advice going in the other direction. In fact, one of the reasons why I wanted to come to the University of Limerick was because I found out that you had an upskilling program. And we'd been trying in Australia for so long to get something similar going and run up against a lot of barriers. So I really wanted to see how this program worked, and to see it from the inside was very interesting. But the sort of lessons, I suppose, to take to a different context, I think the first lesson is always that it's never possible to just lift something from one cultural context and put it down into a different context and think that it will work, because it won't. But there are kind of higher level things that that do help. And I suppose one thing that I learned was that you really, yes, of course it's about developing mathematics teachers' knowledge. That's focusing on the individual teacher. But thinking about why does that program work, it's more because of the other circumstances that it's embedded within. So how does the school system work in Ireland? What are relations like between universities, schools, government departments? What is the culture of education in Ireland? Only when you understand that can you get a sense of what are the real enablers and the barriers. So understanding, what are the incentives for teachers to participate in this program in Ireland? So, for example, one really important incentive is that you have mathematics recorded as an additional specialised subject that you are qualified to teach by the Teaching Council. Whereas in Australia, most state-based teacher registration authorities do not record your teaching specialisation.
Right, okay.
So an incentive that works in Ireland will not work in Australia.
Very interesting. And do they do an upskilling program then in Australia? Has it now started to happen there?
In fact, there are multiple upskilling programs offered by multiple universities. None that are all that much like the PDMT. But interestingly, even there are a couple of those programs that are funded by the national government in terms of tuition fees and so on, similar to the PDMT. But even that has not been enough of an incentive to encourage large-scale uptake by teachers,
yes,
like we have in Ireland here.
Yes, of course. And the thing is, I'm just struck by what you said about actually copying or taking something directly from one culture and one country into another. I remember starting off when I did my comparative study with Norway and math and science, CPD for teachers. And I remember being so excited in that first year or two about all the things I was finding there, and I was going to bring back so many brilliant ideas. And sure, the next thing, by the time I came to the end of the PhD, I realised, oh my goodness, you can't do a direct causal comparison. So then I was forced to have to become more nuanced and just think of the complexity. And I ended up making Norway the minor part of the dissertation, and I really was forced to rethink. But at the same time, that cosmopolitan view of working with international and seeing what's happening around the world, as you are here with your commission, the International Commission for Mathematics Instruction, and all of those contacts and networks you've made over the years, that collegiality from different countries, that must have taught you a huge amount. You've got a lot to give, but you must have learned a huge amount in that journey.
Definitely, Geraldine, yes. So I've been involved with ICMI. I've been on the executive for 8 years before I became president. Of course, as president, you get to see more of what the organisation does. We do quite a lot of work in developing countries where certainly there are similarities in the kind of questions that you might ask, say, as a researcher in all countries around the world, but there are some more pressing issues in a developing country that would not be such a pressing issue in a place like Ireland or Australia, for example. And it's only when you start working with people on the ground that the scales fall away from your eyes and you realise, no, this is something that really matters. For example, I have many good colleagues in South Africa, which is a very particular context, still coming to grips with a post-apartheid legacy, and the lack of preparation, mathematical preparation for teachers there.
Yes.
In so many countries, resources that we take for granted simply don't exist.
Yes.
And I'm not even talking about technology, for example.
Of course. Yes.
In many countries, the mathematics education as a field of research or practice is not even recognised.
Yes.
So it's incredibly difficult to make any progress there. But even not just in developing countries, one of the recent ICMI studies that we did was on mathematics curriculum reform around the world. So we had a conference which drew people from different countries. And of course, mathematics educators are often involved in curriculum reform, but we found that, surprisingly, very little research had been published about curriculum reform. So it's something that we do, but we don't necessarily research on.
Yes.
And we found some fascinating differences about the way that curricula get developed and written around the world, which was quite eye-opening. So yes, I mean, an opportunity to be involved in an international organisation really, well, no, to say it's mind-expanding is a bit trite, but it shows you complexity and diversity.
It does. It shows you. It kind of understands we have knowledge in a big sea of ignorance. In the way, if you put it in its right way, you begin to understand. You start getting measured with your claims, and you start understanding the bigger picture. And I suppose you do better work then with your PhD students and your postdocs and visiting fellows and all that we have now. You start, as I said, there's a growing journey for me anyway, in all of that collegiality and working with people, and you grow and develop yourself, and it is very, very valuable for yourself, but also the contribution that you can make as well in the space there. All of that mathematics education that you've done, and the border crossing and the numeracy across the curriculum, but you've also done with a colleague, if I can remember her name, I can't actually, you've done a review on STEM education, and you've done a review on STEM and where that might be going. Mm-hmm. And of course it originated, I suppose, from that pipeline of talent and all of that. Where are your thoughts on STEM education at the moment?
Yes, I think you might be referring to a special issue of ZDM Mathematics Education Journal. That was Susanna Carrera.
Yes.
And I were the guest editors, and we wrote a survey paper just sort of surveying the state of the field a couple of years ago. I think, there's a lot of activity around STEM education. I see here in Ireland, in the primary school curriculum, STEM is now embedded in the primary school curriculum as a thing in its own right. I think there are many challenges for STEM education. One challenge is that in most school curricula, STEM is not in the curriculum.
Yeah.
So the subjects are still separate discipline-based silos.
They are.
And so STEM finds it difficult to make a space. Often STEM activities are done after school, for example, or it doesn't fit into the school timetable. So I think that's one of the challenges that STEM education faces. I think another big challenge, particularly in secondary schools, is that teachers are trained to be discipline-based specialists.
They are, yes.
So how do you prepare a teacher to teach in a STEM space when it's highly unlikely that any teacher can be a specialist in science and technology and engineering and mathematics?
Yes.
So the only way that I can think for that to happen is through collaboration between teachers of the different disciplines.
Yes, and possibly, as you say, that there will, if they're serious about it into the future, maybe there will be a teacher called a STEM teacher, as that they're, when they go through the university undergrad and they go through their initial teacher education, that they'll actually come out with that kind of space. Because, as you say, that there is that, even though, of course, our subject content knowledge is just a selection from culture and curriculum, but that there is that sense of being a disciplinary specialist, whereas in fact, I suppose all education is interdisciplinary, if not transdisciplinary. But it's like, if that isn't happening in practice on the ground, as you say, it's how to find the spaces. And then with your critical stuff that you're talking about there coming from Australia, I'm very much trying to keep a big umbrella and try and get everyone think of STEAM as well as STEM, bring in the ethics and maybe the arts and all that into the space. But of course, there's a journey in that as well.
Yes,
I mean, I suppose it originated from just maybe thinking of the pipeline of talent, but I suppose the international reports are now looking for good citizenship and good sustainability, and us to start looking at how we relate with one another and all of that. There's a new challenge in there, isn't there?
And I think it comes back to probably the most important question that we should be asking, which is, what is the purpose of education?
Yeah.
What's the purpose of schooling? And I know schooling is not the same as education, but I certainly remember when I was a pre-service teacher, that was in the first lecture that we had. And of course it was a question that I'd never thought about, but we must not forget that.
We mustn't. I think the philosophical question, the ethical question has to be added all the time in there, and it has to provoke us to think as well about what that might mean today as opposed to what it meant 20 or 50 years ago. I mean, that's the real challenge, because people might step in with answers, but I think we need to be keeping the question alive. Is a wonderful approach.
Well, yes, it's the same question, but the answer changes over time.
It does. Is there anything we've left out? Anything we've forgotten, Merrilyn? Niamh had to go off. She was doing some teaching, and she's going to be doing a research seminar with you. And I know you're going visiting our friends in Mary Immaculate College, and we'll meet up for a meal, I'm sure, at some point before the next few days is out. Is there anything additional anything I have forgotten to ask you?
I think you've done very well, Geraldine, and I'd just like to say what a great privilege it was to live here and to work here for 3 years. It's the best job I've ever had, and the best people I've ever worked with, and it's just an absolute delight to be able to come back and visit, and it feels like coming home. Thank you.
That's lovely. Wonderful to hear. Thank you very, very much. We've been talking there to Professor Merrilyn Goos, and she's come from Australia and is here in person with us at the University of Limerick and in EPI STEM. So thank you very much, Merrilyn.
You're welcome.
Our musical selection today is by Sarbik Guha. Sarbik is known more frequently by his stage name Bicky, or Bicky and his Buddies. He's a third-year PhD student in arts practice in the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance. And Bicky his supervisors are Professor Helen Phelan and Professor Anne McFarlane. And here he's going to play a song that his very first original composition, actually, and he's accompanying himself on his acoustic guitar, and it's called It's High Time You Make Her Believe.
She has wings, and she lives beyond the sunshine. She's neither yours to claim, nor his or mine. Imperfections, that's what her life's about. And I've seen it all from her very eyes. And she gone now to another place, far, far away, far away. And you've dropped out of this race, but deep inside the well, she wants to be free. High time you pull her out, high time you make her believe. High time you pull her out, high time you make her believe. And every day you see her in the sky. And after all, it's just another trick of the light. She's bet it all as the years kept running by. And it's cleansed her soul, left some scars behind. And she may be gone now to another place, far, far away, far away. And you've dropped out of this race, but deep inside the well, she wants to be free. High time you pull her out, high time you High time you pull her out. High time you make her believe. High time you pull her out. High time you make her believe. High time